everyone, and welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. Today's tutorial is one I have been wanting to share with you guys since I started my YouTube channel. Today we're going over the Petal Pouch from Noodlehead. So this was actually one of the very first bag patterns that I ever purchased. I saw somebody on social media making these. I thought maybe I could give it a try as a brand new bag maker, and it did not disappoint. Lately, I've been busting out a whole bunch of these. It is such a sweet, sweet shape. It has that beautiful curve on the top, little angles on the side. It's just such a beautiful little bag that you can do a lot with, and we'll talk about that more in just a moment. But first I want to show you, this is a simple bag. This is perfect for beginners. You have a panel on the front, a panel on the back, a nice curved zipper up top. When you open it up, you have just the basic lining inside. There's no pockets, so that really allows you to build on the pattern however you need to. If you want to add some more designs to the front and the back, you can do that. If you want to add some zip pockets or little slip pockets inside, you can do that. But if you're a beginner and you just want a really quick sew, just leave it as is, whip it out. You can make dozens of these pretty quickly. So for this first version here, I did stick with the pattern. I used quilt cotton on the front and on the back, and for the lining, I used some woven interfacing just to beef it up a bit. However, you can use vinyl. This is a faux leather vinyl, and you can see with that, it actually keeps the shape really, really well. And then waterproof canvas on the inside. By doing that, I do not need to add any woven interfacing. I do not need to add any fusible fleece. It holds its structure really well. It's not quite as loosey-goosey as like a quilt cotton version. You see the quilt cotton version is a little bit looser. This is much firmer. It's a little bit more tricky to work with when you use the waterproof canvas for the lining. However, it holds it together really well, really firm, very professional finish when you change the materials just a little bit, which is funny because you're changing what materials you used for the exterior and the lining. However, you're actually using less stuff because you don't have any interfacing at all in this version. So here's another version I made. I know I made quite a few, guys, but this is another version I made, and this one is actually quilt cotton that I just quickly quilted onto some batting. So I took a layer of quilt batting, a layer of quilt cotton, I ran it under my machine a few times, and then I cut out the pattern pieces. That means I don't have to use the fusible fleece here. I also didn't use any woven interfacing on this one. Also, with that little side tab that's in the pattern, I added a D-ring so that I can attach this to a wristlet or attach it to a keychain and attach it to a bag very easily. For the lining on this, I did use pull fabric, which is a nice waterproof fabric. Again, because I did that, I don't need any woven interfacing. So once again, I'm reducing the cost of making the bag and the amount of stuff I need by just changing up a couple pieces. Okay, now before we get started, I have to show you. The pattern actually has two sizes. Those sizes I just showed you were the larger sizes, but there's a small size, and it is just the most adorable little tiny petal pouch. Look at how cute this is. So it's the exact same design, just mini. I open it up top. Again, I use my pull lining for this, so waterproof, easy to wipe down, easy to clean lining. And when I made this, I thought, you know what? This would serve a really good purpose for this year. So here's another version I made. I added that D-ring to the loop, and then I added my little hand sanitizer holder that I made in a previous video. I added that to the D-ring, and then when I open this up, again, I have that easy to wipe down waterproof lining. I open it up and I have a face mask in here. So you see, you can take this, put in your face mask, zip it up, add any sort of keychain you like, add some hand sanitizer to it, clip this onto a backpack, clip this onto the inside of your purse, the outside of your purse, whatever, and now you have kind of like your 2020 essentials right on hand, easy to access. This is such a fun little pattern. All right, so as you can see, the sky is the limit with what you can do with this bag, which I absolutely love. I mean, I love the big bags with a lot of instructions and a lot of use, but basic little bags like this really allow you to kind of play around with what you want to do. I tested out a lot of things. I tested out vinyl, I tested out cork, I tested out quilted cotton, I tested out just basic cotton. I did not find any problems using any of the materials here, so whatever you have on hand, it should work. For today's tutorial, I actually have a couple leftover small quilt blocks that I just kind of attached some extra fabric to. So we're going to use those for the exterior. I'm going to show you how we do that because I get this question a lot, how to use quilt blocks in a bag. I'll also be using the pull lining, so that waterproof lining for the interior of the bag. This pattern is actually written to use pre-cut zippers. So for example, on these smaller bags here, I use metal zippers that are the right size. So I didn't use any zipper tape for those. However, I will be using zipper tape for the pattern today. So I will show you how long you have to cut that and how you adjust it if you're using zipper tape. So thank you so much to Anna over at Noodlehead for allowing me to film this tutorial today. I am so excited to be able to use some Noodlehead patterns over in the videos. You guys, go check out Noodlehead if you haven't already. I will obviously have a link down in the description for the pattern and her website. There are so many amazing options. If you see any other Noodlehead patterns that you are just dying to make sure you leave it down in the comments and I will add it to my list right away. If you're not already a subscriber to the channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, anything you want to say, leave them down in the comment section. Pinned to the very top of the comment section will be timestamps for this video. There's not a whole lot to this, honestly. This is a pretty quick make. So whatever timestamps are needed, they will be there in the comment section. All right, let's get started. So here is just a quick close-up of all the different options I made. Here are the large size bags. This is the one that was quilted with just regular quilt cotton and batting. Here is that faux leather vinyl. This will work with any vinyl really. I would avoid the really thick, sticky, glittery vinyl. That might be a little challenging for you to work with on all these curves. And then down here is just quilt cotton on the lining and the exterior. You can see I made a little small cork one here and then a small faux leather vinyl one as well. This little side tab is really recommended for the larger versions. And you can see I used vinyl on all of them. I do recommend using something beefier for these side tabs. I wouldn't just use a piece of quilt cotton that's not interfaced because I find that can rip, especially if you add any hardware to it. But you can add a D-ring, you can leave it alone, you can add a keychain later. But you can see you can still add this to the smaller sizes. I just decreased the width by 1/4 inch. So these side tabs on the larger are 1 inch wide. For the smaller size, I made it 3/4 inch wide, just so it's not so bulky. And then I also adjusted my hardware. I have a 3/4 inch D-ring on the small and a 1 inch D-ring on the large. So here is all the fabric I'm using today. Get scrappy with this, have fun with this bag. For this, you're going to need a fat 1/4 of exterior fabric, vinyl, cork, quilt cotton, whatever you want. You're also gonna need a fat 1/4 of lining fabric. My exterior will be made of quilt cotton pieced together. These are these cute little quilt blocks that I made in my latest block of the month. I'll have a link for that video down below. I'm using pull fabric for my lining, which is easy to wipe down, so I don't need to interface this with any sort of woven interfacing. I do have my 2 cuts of woven fuse, so this is that woven interfacing, and what I'm actually going to do is fuse this onto this big cut of fabric here and then cut down my fabric. And then I'm also using 2 pieces of fusible fleece. This is just going to be applied to the exterior fabric as well to beef it up just a little bit. It's not necessary to add any sort of fusible fleece, but it is going to provide more structure to the bag. So for the needles today, you can use 80-12 or 70-10 if you're using something like vinyl. I do recommend using the thicker needles, so the 80-12. If you're just using quilt cotton, 70-10 will be fine. I'll be using zipper tape today, so I have my zipper tape and a pull. The thread I'm using is this Mara 100, so this is a nice polyester thread. Don't forget you have a little tab here cut out from your quilt cotton for the zipper tab on your zipper. I have a metal bag tag that I had made, and I'll have a link down below with how that process went. And then I also have this fun little keychain right here, which I will attach to my little vinyl side tab for the bag today. This little side tab is optional, but if you do include one, I do suggest you beef it up, so make it a piece of vinyl or use quilt cotton, but just make sure you add the woven interfacing to it so it doesn't rip. I do suggest that you print out the pattern pieces twice. One where you just cut the exterior of the pattern piece, and then a second one where you cut that exterior part, but then you cut those dash lines for your darts. So we will be working with darts today, which are essentially like boxing the corners, just a little bit different, especially for a curved surface. Having 2 cuts like this is going to be helpful, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment. So as you can see, my exterior pieces have not been cut down yet. What I did was I took 2 little extra quilt blocks that I had, and then I just sewed on large rectangles on the sides and the tops. My goal was to make sure I had a scrappy piece of fabric that was bigger than the exterior template. That way, all I have to do is cut out the woven interfacing using the template provided in the pattern, and then I just have to fuse this to the back of this scrappy block, and then I can cut it out that way, and I have the perfect size. This is the method I use for incorporating quilt blocks into bags. Just start attaching fabric all around it until it's bigger than you need it to be, and then use your woven interfacing as your template and then cut it down. So working on these one at a time, what I'm gonna do is just turn this right side down, and then I'm gonna give it one quick press on the back just to make sure everything is nice and flat before I attach my interfacing. All right, now I can take my woven interfacing and I'm just gonna center it over my middle design. Remember, you do have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so take that into account when you're figuring this out. All right, so once I have that centered the way I want, I can grab my iron and just press along the back of my woven interfacing. And with the woven fuse, you can iron on the back just fine. And now I'm gonna flip this over so that we have the front right side up. And then I'm gonna give it one more press on the front. I do like to use steam when I'm attaching my woven interfacing. I find that it fuses better that way. All right, I can put this to the side for just a moment. Grab your remaining exterior unit and do the same thing. All right, once you have the woven interfacing fused onto the back, all I'm gonna do now is use that as my pattern to trace. So I just have to cut around that woven interfacing, and then I'll have the perfect cut for my exterior fabric. All right, once you have them cut out, your pattern pieces should look something like this. Obviously, if you're not using quilt blocks, you don't have to go through all of that. You can just cut out your exterior using the templates, just like you do with the lining. Now this next step is completely optional, and if you are a beginner, I do suggest just skipping it. You don't need to add fusible fleece to this. However, fusible fleece is going to make this very sturdy, and it's going to allow it to keep its shape and not flop down. However, this will be in the seams, so our seams will bulk up, which could make it a little bit more challenging to sew, especially since we have all these curves. So to add fusible fleece, I like to grab the fusible fleece cut, and it should already be cut out using your template, and lay it so that it's fuzzy side down and that rough glue side is facing up. I'll then take my exterior piece and lay it wrong side down and line it up perfectly over that fusible fleece cut. And then I'll press from the right side of my exterior panel with steam. I find pressing from the back of fusible fleece is no good. It doesn't stick very well. I have to press from the front so that the most heat will get to that glue. Repeat this with the other exterior panel. And for those of you that are gonna ask, the iron I'm using today is a Rowenta Focus. It is not cordless, but I really enjoy this iron. So if you'd like, you can always add your woven interfacing to your lining as well. Since I'm using this waterproof lining, I don't need to. If you're using quilt cotton, you definitely can. However, it's not required. The pattern actually only suggests adding the woven interfacing to the exterior, so it's your choice here. So before we move on, let's go ahead and mark our darts. So remember I told you to cut out 2 of these pattern pieces, and that second one you cut on those dash lines, which are your dart stitch lines. So I'm going to take my exterior and lay it wrong side up, line up the top and side edges, and you should see there's a little overhang over here, and then I'll just trace that dart mark. Be very careful when you're cutting out your pattern pieces that you don't accidentally cut along this line. I have done that, and it makes the bag quite a bit more challenging. So make sure you mark your dart lines on both sides. This friction pen was not working on this fusible fleece, so I'm going to use my Sew Line air erasing marker. And hopefully it won't erase too fast. So continue marking these darts on both of your exterior panels and both of your lining panels. What's funny, on this fabric, the air erasing marker doesn't work at all, but the friction pen does. So this is why it's always good to have a couple of different options for marking on your fabric. Try not to use just a regular pen, because if your bag gets wet, it could bleed really easily. Always use pens and markers that are made for fabric, but have a few different options. Now that these are all prepped, we can just put them to the side. All right, if you're using a pre-cut zipper, then you're fine. If you're using zipper tape, let's cut our zipper tape down to 11 1/4 inch. So I'm just gonna line it up with my ruler here and measure 11 1/4 inch. And I'm going to mark on both sides. And then I can just grab some scissors and cut along my zipper tape. Don't forget to add your zipper pull. I've seen a lot of you guys forgetting to add your zipper pull when you're installing your zipper, and then you realize when the bag's done you can't open it. So don't forget to use your zipper pull. Okay, you can put your zipper to the side for just a moment. grab your zipper tab and your iron, and take your zipper tab and lay it right side down. Take the short edges and fold them wrong sides together so that they meet. You're just folding it in half and then give it a little press. So fold this in half and then press along that midpoint, open it back up, and then take those shorter edges, fold them wrong sides together up so that that raw edge meets that midpoint press that you just made, and then press it again. Do the same on the other side. We're essentially building a little zipper tab hot dog here. And then you can fold the whole unit together again so you don't have any raw edges on the longer sides now of your zipper tab. Now, if you're using a pre-cut 10-inch zipper, meaning it's not zipper tape and it has those little metal ends on the other side, make sure you measure 1/2 inch from the metal stopper on the closed side. So you see, when I close my zipper, this side will be the closed side and this side will be the open side. So on the closed side, measure 1/2 inch away from that metal zipper stop and trim your zipper down. You just want to have 1/2 inch here so we can wrap our zipper tab around the end, and we don't want to cut too much and end up having the zipper tab go over the metal stopper. You will be sewing on your zipper tab, so you don't want it going over the stopper. No sewing on metal. You can add a couple clips to hold this zipper tab in place. My zipper tape are plastic teeth, even though they look like metal. So since they're plastic, I can sew over them. So we're going to sew along this interior folded edge at 1/8 inch seam allowance just to hold the zipper tab down. Once you have your zipper tab sewn on, you can trim down the sides so that it's the same width as your zipper tape. All right, now we're going to fold down the edges of the open side of our zipper. So the easiest way I find to do that is let's measure 3/4 inch down from the top of one of the raw edges. And you want to make sure that these are the same. So let's look at this real quick. Don't let that zipper fly off. Keep it on there. But you see how the top of my zipper tape right here is lower than the top of this side? Try to cut this down so it's nice and straight. All right, so now I'm going to measure down 3/4 inch from the top of one side of the zipper tape. And I'm just going to mark right on the edge of my zipper tape. It's going to be in the seam allowance, so don't make a big mark all the way across. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, 3/4 inch down, right on the edge. Here we go. Now, where that mark is, I'm going to pinch my zipper tape so that it's wrong sides together. Just pinch it in half like that. And you can see that the zipper teeth are trying to curve up and to the right. We're going to let them do that. We're just going to encourage them to go to the right, keeping that side pinched. And now you see we have a little right angle for our zipper teeth. Let me pin it so you can see it better. All right, you see that? It goes up and over. We have a nice fold right here, so we don't have a big mess, you know, you're not like scrunching it and trying to sew it. We're gonna make it nice and clean. Do the same on the other side. So I'm just pinching right where that mark is, letting this teeth this time go up and to the left, folding them back, and then I will just add a clip, and there we go. A stiletto here is going to help you when we're top stitching this down. What we're going to do now is we're going to just stitch right along the edges to hold this in place. A zipper foot is going to be very helpful for this. I like to always start my stitching towards the center of the zipper and then go out towards the end. If you start right here, it's kind of hard to keep it all together. So start from the center, go towards the end, and then off the edge of the zipper. Using a stiletto to hold this folded is going to be helpful. See, once you have those sides top stitched down, you can see if you try to close your zipper, it'll stop. This is just a really nice way to finish off the zipper. You can go ahead and put your zipper to the side. So if you're going to add a little loop to the side, grab your front panel. And I'm actually going to take my loop and loop it through my keychain now. Now, see, this is a keychain, so it does open up. I don't have to add this right now. I could add this at the end, but pulling these keychain things apart kind of breaks my nails. So I'm going to try adding it now and sewing very carefully when I'm sewing over this. If you're using a D-ring, you do need to add it now. You can't wait until the bag is done. Keychains, however, it's totally up to you when you add them. Now we're going to measure about 1 inch from the top on the left side and just take those raw edges of your loop and line them up with the left raw edge, just like this, so that the folded edge of the loop and any hardware you have is pointing into the center of the bag. We can just take this to the sewing machine real quick and baste down along this edge just to hold this in place. Alrighty, isn't that adorable? I just love this little bag. So I'm going to do the next step a little differently than what the pattern suggests. I'm a big fan of using midpoints on things to line it all up. So I'm going to show you how I do that. First, I'm going to take my exterior panel and I'm going to fold it so that the short side edges come together. And all I want to do is find that top midpoint of my exterior panel. You could use scissors here to clip a tiny little triangle, or you can use a marker to mark it. There we go. And now I need to find the midpoint of my zipper. So I'm just gonna close it all the way, fold them wrong sides together so that my folded edges in my zipper tab come together. And then I will mark on the midpoint. There we go. All right, so now with your exterior right side up, take your zipper and lay it right side down and make sure that when the zipper is closed, it's on the left. Match up those midpoints on the top and clip. And now just go around the entire curve, clipping the zipper to the top edge of your exterior. I find it's easier if I unzip my zipper. All right, now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and baste along this top curved edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have the zipper basted on, grab one of your lining pieces and lay your lining right side down over the right side of your exterior and just line it up with all of the edges and clip. So we're really focused on just this top zipper edge, but I also like to clip on the side just to make sure everything stays straight. All right, now let's take this to the sewing machine and sew along this top curved edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have that stitched on, let's go ahead and just trim down any extra zipper tape we have hanging off. And if you have pinking shears, that's a great time to use them. Just trim along this edge. If you don't, then we're just gonna cut little slits all along this rounded edge. Since this is a curve, we wanna allow the fabric to bend really nicely. So you can see I'm cutting slits that get more than halfway into the seam, but not too close to the stitches that I have to worry about the stitches getting cut or getting ripped. All right, once you have that done, you can take your lining panel and flip it back so that it's wrong sides together with your exterior. Oh my goodness, this bag is gonna be so cute. All right, so you are more than welcome to grab your iron and press along this top edge now if you'd like. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this to the sewing machine. We're gonna pull the lining out of the way. So I find this easiest if I kind of curve my bag like this. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna top stitch the seam behind the exterior bag. So on the back, I'm going to pull on that seam and push it towards the exterior side. And then I'm gonna top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along this exterior side all the way to the other side, making sure my lining panel stays out of the way. Now you have your zipper completely attached to one side of your bag. We just have to repeat that with the other side. So grab your remaining exterior panel and once again, let's find that top midpoint. I just fold it, pinch it, and mark it. And make sure you're not marking too far down. You want this to be eaten up in the seam allowance. Your zipper should already have that midpoint mark done. So take your exterior panel with the zipper and lay it right side down against the right side of the other exterior panel. I like to open the zipper all the way to help. Match up those midpoint marks and then clip on that midpoint and then just go along the entire curved edge, clipping your zipper into place. Okay, I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and just base stitch this down at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once you have that zipper basted down, just go ahead and grab your last remaining lining panel and lay it right side down. And so it should be right side of your lining against the back of your zipper and against the right side of that opposite exterior panel. And let's just line it up along that top edge. And just like before, I'm gonna line it up with the side as well. and clip. All right, now let's go sew along this top rounded edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have it all stitched together, go ahead and trim off that little excess zipper if you have it. And then once again, using either pinking shears or just trimming into the seam allowance, let's add some notches along this curved edge so we have a nice smooth curve in the end. All right, let's flip the lining panel so that it's wrong side against the wrong side of the exterior panel. And once again, I like to just tug on my zipper to smooth out this edge. And if you need to, you can definitely press this so that it's really held in place. And now we're gonna go to the sewing machine again. Pull out that lining, and you can see it kind of becomes like a little mountain. Push it down. There you go. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna top stitch along the exterior. Fold that seam behind the exterior so that it's caught in your top stitching. We're not top stitching the lining though. The lining is gonna stay up. So it's easiest for me if I have this as like a bowl and just slowly go around like that at the sewing machine. We're gonna top stitch at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once you have both of your exterior and lining panels sewn onto your zipper, you should have something just like this. Isn't that just so cute if you put it together? It's such a cute little pouch. Ugh, I'm gonna have to make more of these. So the next thing we're gonna do is sew these darts. So go to the wrong side of one of your exterior panels and just pinch along the edge. So what I do is I pinch and make sure I'm pinching right on the top of that corner of my dart. And then I line up the sides and the bottom as best I can. If it's a little off, that's okay. And then I'm just gonna add a clip to hold it in place. I'm gonna repeat this on all of the darted corners of my exterior and my lining. Just adding a clip to hold them in place. And remember, we're always folding right sides together. So once you have all of your darts folded and pinned together, we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and just sew along the marked lines on every single one of our corners. I like to start at the top, so that folded edge, I like to start there, backstitch, go all the way down along the marked line, and then backstitch again at the end. I find that the easiest way to keep everything in place. Once you have all of the pleats sewn, you can kind of push it out and get a general idea of what the pouch looks like. Isn't that just so cute? All right, so now open your zipper, take your exterior panels and lay them right sides together. Let's first start at that seam between the lining and the exterior panels. Line up both of the seams so that they match and add a clip. And then match up 2 of the opposite pleats and fold the seams in opposite directions. Now, I like to push down one side so that it's kind of like a bowl, and that really helps me get everything lined up properly. And then clip along that pleat and then clip the remaining edge. Do the same on the other side. We can kind of push this down like a bowl. Push these seams in opposite directions and then clip. Make sure if you have any hardware, it's inside the bag, it's not hanging out, and it's not too close to the edge. We're going to be very careful when we're sewing that in the next step. So then line up the side seams and clip. There we go. So by having it a bowl like this, I find it's just easier to line up all the edges rather than having both sides kind of poofed out like a little marshmallow. So I'm just going to clip along this entire bottom edge of the exterior panel. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the lining side. So I'm pulling out my lining panels, and then I'm just going to, again, kind of bowl them into one another, just like that. Let's line up the pleats that are opposite of one another, rotate the seams in opposite directions, add a clip, and then you can kind of just push along and straighten up the side. There you go. All right, once I have the sides done, I'm gonna do the same thing on the bottom edge. I'm just kind of pulling on it to get it all lined up. You can see you can't really lie the whole thing flat. So you just kind of have to worry about the edge you're working on. Don't worry about the rest of the bag. All right, now on the bottom of the lining side, let's measure, and you don't have to measure this, just make it approximate, but about 4-inch opening. I just make sure it's between the two pleats centered. 4 inches will give you a good amount of space to turn this right side out. All right, now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew around the entire edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, except between our marked lines. Between these marked lines right here, we're gonna keep that unsewn. Make sure you backstitch well at the beginning and at the end. If you have a little strap over here, make sure you backstitch over this as you go. Also, if you have hardware, pay very close attention to where that metal hardware is. You do not want to go over it with your needle. Last, when you're stitching, make sure you feel for where your zipper tab is. You don't want to sew on your zipper tab. You want to sew close to it, but you don't want the needle to actually go through the zipper tab. That's going to have a really nice clean finish in the end. If you sew over that zipper tab, it's going to kind of smush the side and it's not going to look very good. To help me get really close to things like the zipper tab and my metal hardware, I will be using a zipper foot to sew around this entire bag. So once you have it all stitched together, you can trim the seam allowance down. She does suggest trimming the seam allowance in half on the lining side, except where your opening is. Don't trim that down at all. If you're using bulky fabric for the exterior, it's always a good idea to trim that down as well. So I'm just going to cut the seam allowance down in half everywhere except between my marked edges where that opening is. So once you have it all trimmed down, go ahead and put your hand into that hole and push your bag right side out. And what I like to do is insert my hand into that hole and then push out all the corners everywhere. Make sure you pop up that zipper tab as well. As long as you didn't sew over it, you should have it nice and flat. You might have to kind of manipulate it a little bit. Push out the corners of the exterior. And then with the side with the zipper tab, I find it's easiest if you just put your hand into the main part of the bag and kind of push your finger under it. There you go. You should have a little hole on the side between the exterior edge and that zipper tab. So I always like to just push it in so I can get a good look at it. All right, let's close up the lining. So pull your lining out. I like to push out the corners this way. I find that helps a little bit. There you go. And then insert your fingers into the edges of your opening and just give it a little tug, and the fabric should naturally just fold down on itself. This doesn't have to be perfect. You don't really need to measure this and make sure it's exactly 1/2 inch fold. Just clip along that folded edge. All right, now all we have to do is top stitch along this fold, closing up that hole entirely, and you're done with your bag. All right, this, I say this all the time, but this might be my favorite bag. It's just so stinking cute. And look at how many different things you can do with it. So I just realized I forgot to add my bag tag. Every time I forget to add those bag tags. That's okay. Honestly, this pouch, it has such a beautiful design. I don't think it really needs the bag tag. So as you can see, there are a lot of options. You can use all kinds of material. You can see on this bag here, it's just one piece of fabric that I quilted on some batting. On this bag, it's actually a quilt block, but I did not quilt it. All I had to do was attach the woven interfacing to the block, and that allowed it so that I could use this really easily without having to worry about these seams pulling or warping in any way. So I get that question a lot. How can I use a quilt block in a bag? Just apply some woven interfacing to the back of your quilt block before you cut it out with the bag pattern, and you'll be in good shape. You can see too, because I use that fusible fleece, it has a nice firm shape. It doesn't fall down on itself. This one does not have fusible fleece, and it does, I mean, you can fold it really easily. It's more floppy, still perfectly usable, but if you wanted a more structured look to your bag, I do suggest using some fusible fleece. So I hope that you enjoyed today's tutorial. I hope this inspires you to go out and make a bunch of these. You guys, once you make one, you're gonna make a dozen. Like, that's just how it works. It's like potato chips. You can't just have one, you're gonna have half the bag. Once you make one of these, you're gonna make a whole bunch, because everybody you know could use one of these, big or small. Everybody can use one. So I hope that you love this. So thank you so much for sewing with me today. I hope that you're having a great day. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye.